Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on this new series of the Godcast is Pat McGibbon. Now, Pat is a former professional footballer who played for numerous clubs, but among them Manchester United and Wigan Athletic, and also won honours for Northern Ireland. But more recently has been working in the field of mental health support, and we'll talk about that. So, Pat, brilliant to get you on the Godcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great, Alex. Thank you, and thanks for the invitation.
Where are you, Pat? You've got a lovely, rich Northern Ireland accent there. Is Northern Ireland home now, or?
Yeah, so I basically in the family moved back in 2002. I'd finished my contract with Wigan Athletic at the time. It was one of those, I suppose, those difficult stages. I think ITV Digital had collapsed in terms of the lower leagues at that stage. I'd went and I was actually on Scunthorpe on loan for a little while at the end of the 2001-2002 season. And then I was offered a short-term contract at Tranmere, but also offered a couple of deals back at home in Northern Ireland. So I just finished the physio degree at that stage. So I decided to make roots again back home. So since 2002, I've been back home with Bernadette, my wife, and obviously with three kids now who are growing up very quickly.
Yeah, well, I've got three kids as well, so you have my sympathies. Pat, can I ask you, when you reflect on your football career, how do you reflect on it? Is it one of satisfaction? Is it one of missed opportunities? What would you say?
I would say, look. I mean, growing up as a child, I was very fortunate. I lived out in the country. We had a big garden and we had goals there. And from a very young age, I just wanted to play football. So when I got the opportunity at 18 to get paid for something I loved doing, it wouldn't matter if it had been Accrington Stanley or Manchester United. That was just my goal and my dream. So I got the opportunity for going on 11 years to actually make a living at something I love doing. So I can only really see it as that. I appreciate everything that happened. It's only now, I suppose, when you reflect back on it that you realise, and sometimes, especially as a professional footballer, you end up a lot of the time, I suppose, just always constantly going forward and looking at the next game. Even, if you lose, then you're straight on to the next game, and it's constant. So you don't get a lot of time for reflection. So it's only now that, when I look back at some of the memories, that I realise, how lucky I was.
Yeah. Did you make the move to Manchester quite well, Pat? I was talking to Trevor Stephen, who joined Burnley from Berwick, and Burnley's not a big place, but it felt very big coming from a place like Berwick. Moving to a city like Manchester, was it easy for you to adapt, or did you struggle with homesickness? How was it?
Yeah, look, it was quite difficult. You're moving back, or you're moving away from your friend set, your families back at home. So you have to sort of settle into all of that. No, I was very lucky in that the landlady that I went to was really, really good. Brenda Gosling, God rest her, she made me feel at home and very quickly. But it still takes time, and certainly, that first 12 months was difficult. And I suppose having a few of the other lads within digs, like the likes of Keith Gillespie, Robbie Savage, Gary Twine, and Kevin Pilkington, it helps you to settle because you've got friends both, on the pitch and off the pitch as well. But it was a difficult enough transition.
Yeah, and who were the significant coaches for you in that early formation as a professional, Pat? Who were the ones that stood out for you?
Well, the ones, whenever I first went over to Manchester United as an 18-year-old, obviously I was transitioning between the A team and the reserve team. So, between Jim Ryan with the reserves in that first year, but I suppose more importantly, even Eric Harrison, I thought Eric, as well as obviously we trained in the mornings with the reserves, but as well as that, I would have actually went in and trained with the youth team quite a bit as well in the afternoons. Eric let me train with them, and Eric was he was old school, but he taught some really, really strong lessons. So.
Regarding the senior management of the club at United, Pat, obviously Sir Alex, was he involved with you from an early age? Were you kind of on his radar? Would he have similar conversations with you guys who were in that development period as well as the first team, or was it kind of a thing at a distance that would occur?
No, I think he was very good with the young lads, both the apprentices and the young pros. You only have to look at it with that group that came through in terms of the class of '92, and the fact that I always said as much as he was obviously a terrifically successful manager, I think he was almost like a father to the young lads in particular. So it didn't happen very often, but if you ever, needed a bit of advice, it was just a matter of knocking the door, and that was the great thing about it.
And as you're waiting for an opportunity, there's two things I want to talk to, if that's about mental health. What was it like for you mentally? Just because you were at United quite a long time. Was it 5 years you were there, Pat?
So I was there 5 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And I went over a little bit older than most of the lads that would have went across, so the likes of Keith Gillespie, Colin Murdoch, the lads like that, they went over at 16 years of age. I had finished my A-levels as probably, a little bit more mature in the 18 and 19, and then had 5 really good years and good educational years at Manchester United.
And seeing people develop and evolve and getting their first opportunities, did that affect your mental well-being in any way, or did it make you more determined? How did you deal with the not really getting that chance at the first team?
Yeah, well, I always, I've always seen life as a learning experience. From a very young age, I always, as well as having, I suppose, the football and the sporting side of me, always had a bit of education about me as well. So, as I say, I'd finished my A-levels before I headed across. And, when you play football, as you say, you're going to have good days, bad days, but it's about taking it, as a learning experience. And even when you get to that level at Manchester United, you're constantly having to try and strive. But I always was interested in watching the first team pros and how they reacted to things. And, sometimes things don't necessarily turn out in terms of, my debut at Manchester United, and it was a very difficult one. But because of what happened, I suppose, which we'll speak about in terms of my brother's death through suicide, it put things into perspective as well. So, and I only ever see life as an education.
Yeah, and talking about your brother, Pat, you how old were you when your brother died? Were you were only a young guy, weren't you?
Yeah, so I was only about 8 months into me going over to Old Trafford at the time. So as we mentioned earlier, that you've still the homesickness and transition to deal with. So then having another, abnormal stressor like a tragedy, like my brother's death, and obviously Philip wasn't just my brother; he's my best friend as well. So it was a very difficult time, and something that I suppose football gave me a platform and a focus during that time. More than anything, a level of stability. And that's why, I'm very thankful to the 5 years I had at Manchester United, and also the 5 years I had at Wigan Athletic, where there was a great fabric to it as well.
Yeah. And if you're all right to talk about your brother, Pat, were there any warning signs about Philip's mental condition? Were you anxious about him before? Was there any illness that was evident?
No, there wasn't anything that really stood out at the time. As I said, like I'd been over there 8 months, and maybe if I had been around, then I may have noticed things. But unfortunately, and this is why even with the charity that the founder trained to be smart with, our slogan is it's smart to talk. Unless unless he speaks about the problems that, and dealing with this now in terms of, that there has to be a level of trust, and sometimes even your closest, it's difficult to go to. So there was no real signs.
No. And again, just thinking about the mental health aspect of this, Pat, if you're happy to talk about it, what did his death do to you? I mean, I've dealt with numerous aspects of grief in my job, but suicide is one where you just don't really get the answers. Did you really struggle with that for a while, or did you, or have you even now still struggled to come to terms with what happened?
Yeah, it was one of those where after obviously going back for the wake and the funeral, the gaffer told us to take as much time as I needed. It was in April of 1993, so there was only maybe a month of the season left, and I was still transitioning to settle in Manchester at the time. So, but what I found was that my friends had moved on in terms of either going to university or starting work, which meant, me sitting about the house and staying for that period of time was not going to do anything for my mental health. So I headed back to Manchester, within the next week or two. And so probably I didn't properly grieve in what went on. And it was only really when I came back home in 2002, and obviously we had quite a few stressors as it was, and that we had 6 house moves, which are obviously abnormal stressors, and then I started to see sort of triggers of the family home, and these were things that I hadn't seen for 11 years, and all of a sudden the memories, started to get back, and then the questions start to be asked, and you start to, I suppose, go through the grieving process. As I mentioned to you earlier, education's huge for me. But even though I did a physio degree while I was still playing, the physio was quite clinical. Whereas once I did the mental health and well-being diploma, which then brought, I suppose, linked the physical to the mental and emotional health, it gave me much more clarity, and I have to say it's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, and getting out to schools with children and young people, and I suppose giving them practical advice in terms of the normal stressors of life, as opposed to the more abnormal stressors which hit me, and as you mentioned, that grievance process was much further down the line, so it was really coming back 2002 and beyond that grieving process really started.
Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge that as well, Pat, that it took a long period, and then all of a sudden you're faced with it, and I think that's not uncommon with death. Did you seek help then when that happened, or did you? I'm just trying to cast my mind back to the late 90s. I think we've come quite a long way with mental health support, haven't we? I was wondering whether the clubs, like now, a lot of the clubs have chaplains, or they have support staff for the young guys. What was it like for you in that football environment, firstly? And did you have to go outside of that football environment to get the help that you felt you required?
I think certainly whenever I went back to Manchester United, after the funeral, we had a chaplain at Manchester United, so we're actually quite proactive, and I spoke to him a couple of times. But as I said, I didn't realise how important it was to speak, especially on a fairly regular basis, because it's, I know I always say that the cliche is the reason that they've held the test of time, is because they work, and it's that a problem shared is a problem halved. It's only really now, and as I said, once I learned more about that link between mental and emotional health and your physical health, and I suppose I had a couple of lessons to learn, when I came home within that, that it started to create a purpose again, because going beyond the footballing side of things, and obviously with Philip's death, also, and you know, in the last number of years, it's been spoken about quite a lot. But even my purpose when I stopped playing professionally, and you know, I went into the part-time professional game. All of a sudden, you know, used to being Pat McGibbon, the professional footballer, and all of a sudden, yeah, that's the boy that used to play. You know, and it's a difficult time, especially when you put and commit your all into it. So for a while, especially with the physio, which I thought, you know, was too clinical, it was about trying to find purpose again, you know, and it's really now over these last number of years that I've really enjoyed the, you know, and I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and I found that purpose again.
Yeah. And if I can ask you this as well, Pat, I mean, there's the physical well-being and there's the mental well-being. Can I just ask you, you know, this is the Godcast, about the spiritual well-being as well, Pat? You know, you're from Northern Ireland, which historically is a, you know, not so much in recent years, but historically is a very religious country. Were you a spiritual person before? Have you been? Has that remained with you, or has that kind of that just changed over the years and because of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's spiritually, I'm still a very spiritual person, and have a very, I suppose, personal faith to a certain extent. You know, I think with everything that has gone on, but I've always held that faith and that hope, and you know that things would get better, and that obviously, you know, even with the work that I do now with Train to Be Smart, you know, as I said, you know, Philip's my driver within all of this. You know, every day I wake up now, and it's you know, it's so important to me. You know, so I've always held that. You know, even when I was over in Manchester, I would have went to mass on a regular basis. You know, that is, I suppose, fallen away a bit, but not to an extent where I haven't lost, or I've lost my faith. No, that is certainly that I've held on to that, even though it has been very difficult at times.
Have you been challenged with that over the years? And if so, do other people challenge you? You know, I mean, often I get as a priest is, oh, how can you possibly believe when, you know, X, Y, or Z has happened? But I mean, it's about you, it's not about me. But for me, it's just something inside that feels right. Is that the same for you, or?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, there's been certain things that have happened during the time, especially since, you know, I found the Train to Be Smart, and there are things that make me continue to believe and have a faith. You know,
Yeah.
and it's you know, those are obviously private things, but you know, the things that I would say really have, I suppose, resonated with me,
Yeah.
and you know, continue to fill me with passion to do the mental health related work.
Yeah. And just going back to the footy part, I suppose when you play for Man United, it becomes that every other club is, you know, doesn't matter. But I'd like to talk about Wigan Athletic, because Wigan's not far from me in Burnley, and I remember going to Wigan back in the day when I think it was Springfield Park, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
Where the terraces were made of grass, and you know, and you know, it was very much traditional fourth division kind of cut up pitches and small attendances and toilets that stunk of wee, and you know, but you were part of you were at the early stage of that revolution, weren't you? Was that good to be involved with?
Yeah, like it was a tremendous time when I look back now, especially, you know, it had been quite difficult, and again, I would be quite philosophical when it comes to things. You know, that although people love to have a chat and bring up the York City game at Manchester United in my debut, um, the final year, I suppose, was more challenging because in 96, 97, I I'd played the pre-season games with the first team. Was doing quite well, and the gaffer sent me out on loan then to Swansea, but I managed to play one game and then badly damaged my knee. So I was out for 5.5 months in that final year, and then Actually, I think I played a reserve match at Gig Lane at Bury. And after that game, John Deehan had been at the match, and then at that stage, then they offered, they asked me to go out on loan. So I'd just come back from injury. I was, for the first couple of games, even at Wigan Athletic on loan, I was still trying to get into things. But the more games I played, the more I grew and the more confidence I had, and obviously, scoring the goal that helped Wigan get promoted against Colchester, was something that again you can only dream of, So, again, it was a club with a great fabric. The gaffer at United, it wouldn't have mattered if you were a first team player or you were working within the canteen, or you're working within the ground staff, or you're one of the apprentices. The gaffer fostered a real fabric where everybody got on, and it was pretty much the same at Wigan Athletic from the moment I went in on loan, and then obviously signed and stayed there for 5 productive years. So
was it difficult to leave United, or did you shake the cobwebs off quite quickly?
Yeah, I think because things had gone so well initially on loan, and as well as obviously scoring that goal against Colchester, we obviously won the league that year. So whenever I got the chance to sign, I went and had a chat with the gaffer, and the thing about it is at Manchester United, it's a great education, but there were so many terrific players, and that I just had really enjoyed playing competitively. And for my career, it was about doing what I thought was best, and playing competitive football, and rather than, and I know you have to believe in yourself to a certain extent. To play at a club like Manchester United, you have to have a real self belief. But I had just really enjoyed the experience at Wigan Athletic, and after speaking to the gaffer, I made that decision.
Yeah, and I was looking at your Wikipedia profile, Pat, because I was keen to look at which managers you'd played for, and it's easy to go, oh, there's Sir Alex, but you played for some pretty famous names in football, didn't you? Just share some of the differences and the characters that you work with, and maybe who stood out and why, besides Alex, of course.
Yeah, I mean, so I think in the 5 years it was at Wigan, we had 7 managers. So the chairman, Mr. Whelan, I have to say I got on great with Mr. Whelan. He calls a spade a spade. But when it came to the business end of things, obviously he had 7 managers in those 5 years that I was in. So you had Bruce Rioch, obviously. He brought Dennis Bergkamp in. Dar still, you had John Deehan was the first manager that I had. John was a great manager. Obviously, Paul Jewell came in the final year. You had Colin Greenall, who was an ex-player and then took over for a short while. Obviously, Brucey, who did a great job. Brucey did a great job, and it looked like he was going to get or take the Wigan job on. And then I think he went to Crystal Palace maybe instead at the last minute. So quite a few. Ray Mathias. Ray was again did really well with Wigan Athletic. Ray was a great manager. He got on well with players. So I'd quite a few managers, and I suppose with different attributes. So
yeah. And was Roberto Martinez there with you at Wigan?
Yeah, so Roberto was a player, and I got on great with Roberto and Izzy Diaz and that from the start. There's real, as well as being a very, very good footballer, Roberto was able to, socially, he was able to get on with people, and obviously he's moved into management as well, and I wish him well, obviously, with Portugal. So, but Roberto, some of the players that were there during that time, so obviously Michael O'Neill, now he's the Northern Ireland manager. Michael was there in my time there. You've Scott Green, you've Paul Warren, who's obviously is managing Derby now, and Paul was there for a spell as well. Roy Carroll, go through. We actually had a really, really strong side when we were Wigan Athletic, with a lot of players that played within the Premiership as well at some stage.
Yeah, with Roberto, did it come as any surprise that he went into management? Was he a Was he a leader in the dressing room? Was his instincts always to kind of take control of things?
Yeah, look, I think he was a very intelligent, astute man, and he read a lot, and anything that he, I suppose, put his mind to, he would get to do, and that it's great to see. And as I said, I had a great relationship with Roberto. Even we had my wife would have invited him up to the house and that, and it's great. It's great to see people that you've played alongside doing so well and continuing to be involved within the game.
And when you decide to call it a day, Pat, I noticed you ventured in, you dabbled a little bit in managing. In this would it be semi-pro football, would it, in Ireland? Or
that's right, yeah. So I was at my local club, Lurgan Celtic. So whenever I stopped playing, I went there and was player manager for a year, and then I was invited to Monaghan United in the Aircom League down south as assistant manager. Then went to Newry City, and then finally with Portadown as manager. So it was. Whenever I finished playing, and I came back home, I started with my badges and my coaching badges. So I went right up to pro license, so obviously gave me the opportunity. I just found that the state of the clubs involved, the because I was used to the professionalism at times, it just didn't work, and especially with the other parts of what I was doing at the time as well, Alex, and that I'd find it trained to be smart, and I was doing a lot of work surrounding mental health, and that was really my passion. So when it came to a decision between giving up a job as a part-time professional manager within the league, or keeping involved in what I'm doing with Train to Be Smart, there was only one winner.
Yeah. So tell us about Train to Be Smart, Pat. How is it set up? What does it do? Who's it aimed at?
Yeah, so Train to Be Smart is a charity which promotes positive mental health and basically builds resilience in children and young people through sport and activity. So as well as affiliated teams, I would go out into schools and give that message, especially that it's smart to talk message, where the SMART stands for sharing my anxieties, relieves tension. And I think it's a really strong message because as much as sometimes we can have warning signs or something that when you look back on, to actually have that strength to be prepared to speak up about your own mental health issues is the starting point. So we, as I say, we go into schools. I go in and do workshops within clubs. I also work with other mental health groups. So I work with Mindwise and Mental Health UK, Inspire in Northern Ireland, to do various mental health related programs. And it's so needed at the moment. And I suppose the way I would explain it is, it's more about unsticking the stuck. When it comes to, I suppose, more professional help in terms of counselling, we are more about unsticking the stuck and giving practical help within that. And I really, really am passionate about what I do, and I think it's at the moment we're pushing towards a facility which will work alongside a local primary school to give children that platform and those practical skills early on, so that they don't get to that stage, or hopefully don't get to that stage where they need more professional support.
I'm really interested what you said there about unsticking the stuck. How do you go about doing that, Pat? Particularly, kind of when you were talking there, I was thinking, gosh, it's quite difficult. I predominantly deal with adults going through mental health anxieties. When it's a younger person, particularly teenagers, it's a bit. I guess it's a huge stigma for them to put the hand up and say, look, I'm struggling. How do you unstick that stuck? It must be quite difficult at times.
It is, yeah, and this is the thing. Even with some of the methods that I would use within the workshops, a lot of it is introducing things such as deep breathing techniques and the whole thing surrounding Education again, and as you mentioned, spirituality is part of that as well, and it's I suppose breaking it down into smaller steps. So we have scenarios, case studies, sharing experiences as much as anything, Alex, which is is a really powerful one of sharing lived experiences.
Yeah. I don't want to get political, Pat, but I'm interested to know your thoughts. I don't know if you know Cathy McAleer, who's based in Northern Ireland, who's who does martial arts and does lots of works in Belfast with the kids. But recently we had the Prime Minister, and again, this is not political, but the Prime Minister talked about this kind of concept around getting kids into mathematics till 18. I'm not a huge fan of that. I kind of see a different route for lots of kids, and some of these kids just aren't wired for academia. Do you find that the benefits of sport are significant enough to say, look, we need to actually think about this a bit more widely, a bit more sensitively? Some people just aren't wired for certain activities, and I see the value not just with fitness and sport, but music and the arts and things like that. I was just wondering if you had a thought on that, Pat.
Yeah, look, I mean, I would do quite a bit in terms of workshops and public speaking about this. And when I speak to children and young people, they'll say, the phrase, "Don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree." And this is the thing when it comes to even with football, and obviously we mentioned about Chris Casper, and Casper's a centre half partner of mine, and whenever you're playing, a lot of the time you're practically problem solving and you're prioritizing decisions, and that's why I think sport is such a great medium for that. And it's not to say they'll all, that everyone will become professional sports people, but actually giving them the platform, whether that's within the arts, within music, within sports, and giving them the opportunity to find their passion and focus on it. I don't think it's all about just the maths, because the biggest one for me is I've often said this, statistics can be manipulated and misinterpreted, and it's only once you actually get to know people that and that's so important, because I see it so often that especially in professional football, and where it's all about the business end, and because it's a business end, as soon as that, as I said, even towards the end of my career, you start to feel like a piece of meat. Now, it might not have been the way that it was for the club, but you start to feel like that as well, because your career is short lived. You don't, as a professional footballer, you don't have a really long span. So I think it's important to recognise the person, not just the player. And it's the same within education generally. It's about finding those skill sets, and I suppose educating through the skill sets that they find easier to pick up. And not everybody's going to be a mathematician, and not everybody's going to be a professional sports person, but it's finding what their purpose is.
Yeah. Pat, I've really, it's flown by this podcast. I've loved chatting to you about your career and your work in mental health. Just bringing things right up to date and looking at your two significant respective clubs. United seem to have turned a corner, and you will have been delighted with the recent win in the derby, even though it was offside. And Wigan, on the other hand, are in a real battle, aren't they? Where they've got rid of Liam Richardson, who was formerly with Aki Stanley, who around these parts, and Colo Torre's there now. Do you, just a comment on both, really, Pat? Do you think United are going to be pushing right to the end, and do you see Wigan getting out of this trouble they're in?
Certainly, from what I've seen in the last few games in particular, I think there's no doubt that there's been a positive shift at Manchester United. It was always going to be a difficult game on Saturday, but there's no doubt some of the acquisitions that they've brought in. I think Casemiro is quality, absolute quality. But generally, I think that there's definitely been a positive shift there. So I expect them to be, certainly at the very top end come the end of the season. With Wigan Athletic, I have to say I was disappointed to see Liam go. He did such a great job in getting promotion, and I don't think there was an awful lot of, I suppose, money spent, and whether that was, obviously you don't know the ins and outs of that, but I think Liam did a terrific job. So it's disappointing to see Wigan where they are at the minute, but hopefully, before the season's out, they'll get enough points just to get them out of that bottom three, and it's it's hard to watch when it's been a yo-yo for Wigan Athletic in particular. I went over with my family to the FA Cup final in 2013 where they beat Man City, and was at Wembley for that game. And for a club like Wigan Athletic, and thinking back to Springfield Park and those cold Saturdays and Tuesday nights, and all of a sudden win an FA Cup final, it's a dream come true both for the club and obviously for the chairman, with the amount of effort that he put in as well.
And just finally on my club, Pat, Burnley, they're flying high. I mean, it's a bit of revolution under Vincent Kompany. You've been impressed with what you've seen?
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of the Burnley games, but certainly, all the talk has been, the change that Vincent has made, and it's great to see. I mean, we always even, the local derby games when you played your Prestons and played Burnleys at Wigan Athletic was great, and obviously Ian Wright made his debut against myself and Wigan Athletic a long time ago. So it was always a very passionate place. You could tell when you were at Turf Moor that you were always up for a game, and it's great to see them doing well. And I love to see all the Northwest teams do well, because I love my time. I was there the guts of 11 years in the Northwest, and love the time of the people there.
That's great to hear. And one of my all-time Burnley heroes is a guy I'm sure you know, Billy Hamilton, who is a wonderful striker who scored in Spain. Was it 82? Was it
82? Yeah.
Yeah, and he was always one of my heroes. So there we are. Pat, I've loved chatting to you. Thanks ever so much for coming on, and we wish you well with your charity. Is there a Facebook page or any links to it if people want to take a look?
Yeah, so the Facebook page is just train to be smart. So that's train number 2 be smart. And the website is www.traintobesmart.com.
Brilliant. Well, Pat, thanks ever so much. All the best with everything, and you're in a lovely part of the world. And thanks so much for coming on the Godcast. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a million, Alex. Thank you.
Brill, Pat. Perfect.
Is that okay?
I don't even need to edit it. I can just upload it. It's brill. It's just
Great
really
stuff.
interesting. And we have a lot of mental health issues around here, and but mainly homeless guys and girls as well walking into church, and it's quite a desperate situation at the minute, and I don't really know what the answers are.
I know that this is the thing. I mean, I have found a lot of solace in I suppose the simple things in life. There's a local